guys, it's ShadowFlyer. Today we're going to go over 0 day and phase 1 of air assault. So if you haven't seen my last videos, I made a video on just the overview of the course and arrival, in processing, like the very beginning. Be sure to look at those. The links are in the description. But here we go. So 0 day. 0 day was definitely the most physically demanding day of the course. It wasn't absolutely terrible the entire day. In fact, most of the day composed of you waiting and doing absolutely nothing. It was really boring. But when we were actually doing stuff, it was intense. So it was like complete extremes. It was either you were sitting there doing absolutely nothing, or you were running as fast as you can, yelling air assault every time your left foot hits the ground as loud as you can, and just getting yelled at because no matter what you do, you could always do it louder and faster. The day started off with a 2-mile run. We did a little bit of PT. We're still in our, like I said, our OCPs or my ABUs. So it was a weird run, but it wasn't terribly difficult. The worst part about that was the fact that you're not in a PT uniform, so you're not used to running in a heavier uniform and wearing long sleeve, long pants when you run. So that was a little unusual. The only other weird part was the fact that you had 270 people trying to run on a small course, and they started us all at the exact same time. So it was very hard to maneuver because we're all bunched together. We only lost a few people that were just really out of shape. But we did that. One guy literally pooped his pants while we were doing PT. There was a guy at the very beginning of the PT session. He raised his hand and asked if he could go to the bathroom, and they pretty much told him if it wasn't life or death that he had to just suck it up. And apparently he decided it was not worth life or death, so instead he pooped himself. I don't know who it was because I didn't catch a name, but everyone knew when he was around because it smelled absolutely terrible. First, we just thought someone pooped themselves because there were certain places you could go and you're like, it smells like poop, and it shouldn't. And so we just thought that's what happened. But a few minutes later, after doing PT, and the guy went to the bathroom, we realized there was literally poop in the gravel. Like, it was just sitting there. Human. It wasn't like a dog came by and did his business. It was human poop, and we found out later that somewhere before the run started, the guy decided to defecate and must have rolled down his leg, but because we were in the Heat Cat 5 like rolled uniforms, it didn't stay in. I don't know if he was wearing underwear or not, because it was just sitting there where he was before he went to the bathroom. I don't know if that's an Army thing, but apparently a lot of the guys said that they don't like wearing underwear in uniform. And from then on, for the rest of the day, there was always someone in the crowd that smelled like poop. We actually had a ranger guy clean up the mess, literally just by scooting the other gravel around it, like to kind of cover it up. It was funny. It was disgusting, but it was kind of funny at the time. But anyways, so that was the run. After that, we got to go take a shower, and then we went to the obstacle course. The obstacle course, we did it in small groups, so we didn't like do it all at once, which would have made it a little easier, and I think that's why they didn't do it, because the whole point of this was there was absolutely no resting, other than I think maybe once that I caught up to somebody. The only time you ever rested was if you were waiting to do an obstacle because there were other people in front of you. Like I said, that only happened once for me. There was another time I passed someone, but it wasn't like a line. It was they were sitting out on the side temporarily. It was a very intense thing, not necessarily because the obstacles were hard, but because you were always doing something. From the moment you started the first obstacle, which for us was the tough one, you did not stop doing things until you finished. So I'll have more in my next video. I'll include tips on what I think would help you if you end up needing help with the obstacle course. But for this, it was like you did the obstacle. As soon as you got done, you had to yell air assault. Then you had to sprint to the next obstacle, and the little paths between every obstacle was again gravel. It's like almost like what they would call like pea gravel, or like very small river rock gravel, if you're familiar with that kind of landscaping gravel. But like every time you take a step, it just moves from underneath you. So it's like kind of like trying to run on the beach, like in the sand, except I thought it was even worse than that. But yeah, it's very tiring, and then you have to yell air assault every time your left foot hits the ground, which is annoying by itself. But when you're trying to run and you're taking quick steps and saying it that much, you're breathing out a lot, but you don't have much time to breathe in, and it's just very, very hard to breathe. Other than that, the obstacle course wasn't terrible. It didn't last very long. I was annoyed because you had to have your canteen on you pretty much at all times. They allowed you to take it out for the run, and there's a couple of times they'd have you take it out, but for the most part it was with you anywhere you went, and that included the obstacle course. And so even though it's in your cargo pocket and it technically fits, your pants don't like bending to begin with, and when there's a giant canteen in your cargo pocket, it actually ripped my pants. It was a small, like the rip was maybe an inch long. They didn't notice, but I couldn't wear those pants anymore because they had holes in them. But I will say, for the school being as attention to detail driven as they claim they are, they didn't actually do nearly as much as they probably should have. Like they, even on like the checklist on things to bring, like they make it very clear that it has to be like serviceable items. So like there can't be noticeable stains, holes, rips, stuff like that. But people were not only bringing stuff that was unserviceable to the like on their equipment packing list, like they were wearing it. I mean, maybe it's an Army thing. Again, it's I guess an Air Force perspective, but I saw guys all the time that they had holes in their pants. They had belts on backwards, belts on wrong. I probably almost 5 or 6 times during the course saw people that they were just missing like belt loops. Either like the belt loop was literally like ripped off and it was just dangling there, or like they had fed their belt through in such a hurry and they missed the belt loop. What was actually more annoying than anything was when I would like suggest something or say something and they'd make fun of me for it, and that part I'm like, okay, whatever. But what would be annoying is when I would make the suggestion, they would tell me how terrible of an idea it is, and then like a minute later they would actually do it. Well, obviously without giving me credit. They would say, oh, I decided we're going to do this. Whether it's distribution of MREs and like things that just like make more sense to do it a different way, or it's like, all right, well, he said bring out 20 guys and you have like way too many people in that line. We should probably do something. And they're like, oh, you're stupid. Can you even count to 20? And I'm like, well, yeah, pretty sure I can, because there's 23 guys in that line. But anyways, those are just things that like they stood out to me as I think it's partly just like they're trying to tease me, but at the same time it's like I'm trying to help you, so maybe you could actually like take my advice seriously. Even though I'm an Air Force guy, I might actually have something to say that's worthwhile. Anyways, back to like 0 day. So after the obstacle course, I wanted to talk about the height issue. So a lot of people didn't pass the confidence climb, and it was primarily because of height. So I mentioned earlier that there were about 30 females with us at the beginning, and almost 20 females got dropped just in the obstacle course, like just during 0 day. So the main reason, from what I understood from the people I talked to, was they didn't necessarily have a physical issue. Like the girls that were there, they were in amazing shape. In fact, if anything, there were times they might have had an advantage over me, just because they're more used to like that style of training. However, the advantage I had was height. So I'm almost 6 foot, I'm 5'11", so in short. In the confidence climb, there are 3 vertical beams going straight in the air, kind of like telephone poles, and then there's horizontal beams that go across them just all the way up. And the goal is you just climb from one beam to the next, and you have to go over the top and then back down the other side. They explain how to do it at Air Assault, and I think there's YouTube videos on it too. But what they don't tell you is that those beams are spaced differently. So you start off and the beams are maybe 3 feet apart. So it's not a very, like, it's almost like climbing a elongated ladder. But then every time you get up one horizontal beam, they lengthen how far they're spaced. So there were times I had two hands on the beam and I just pulled myself up, and they didn't yell at me, but there were plenty of people they did yell at for that. So if you can get away with it, great. But don't expect to. But anyways, for anyone under like 5'5", that confidence climb is going to get very difficult after you reach halfway, just because they're spaced out so much. Whether it's a 3-point of contact issue or not, it's going to be a lot more difficult, because at that point it's like reaching above your head and trying to pull yourself up and onto that bar so you can gain your balance and grab the next one. And at that point it would be, I guess, more confidence than anything. But if you're even close to 6 foot or above, it's not an issue. Another thing when it comes to Army is apparently they don't always think things through. I know that's a very generic statement. They gave us food without serving utensils. And the irony here is that there were 2 times total in the entire course that they forgot to give us serving utensils. But even when they did, we had servers like using their bare hands. Nobody washed their hands. They just used the serving utensil. If they needed to touch it with their hand to like get it onto the plate or something, they did. There were people sneezing while they were serving food, wiping their nose and then serving food. A lot of people got sick, and I would not be surprised if it was because of the way we were serving food. But the irony with this was because the days they gave us serving utensils, that's all they used. They didn't use gloves or hand sanitizer or anything. The day that when they forgot to give us serving utensils, they gave us gloves. If this was an Air Force thing, I feel like we would have complained more, but it was just funny to me, because it's like it's an Army thing. They never care about how you do things, just the point is get it done. And here we literally waited for an hour to eat our food because nobody could find serving utensils. And it's like, we have gloves, we have places to wash our hands, and most of the stuff they were serving was like chicken, or let's see, we had chicken, we had mashed potatoes, corn, pasta, some type of beef or hamburger or something. We weren't quite sure what it was, but we ended up eating it. But anyways, like the chicken and the hamburger, whatever it was, the patties, like those you could easily put some gloves on, put it on someone's plate. Is it something that they would maybe frown upon in like a commercial restaurant or whatever? Probably, but it's an Army camp. Why would anybody care? I mean, we've been serving without anything protecting our hands anyways, so I don't see why you can't put on a glove and serve it. But anyways, we waited for an hour because no one had serving utensils, and then we got the serving utensils and proceeded to serve without the gloves on. With, again, no one washed their hands. People were still sneezing at this point. People were starting to get sick, so I don't understand what their thought process is, but that's just how it went. So I just kind of was along for the ride. At the end of 0 day, they finally were like, congratulations, you have been admitted into the course, pretty much, because their big claim is that until you finish a 0 day, you are not considered an air assault student. You are just considered like, I don't remember what they call this, but like almost like candidates or like applicants. But we weren't considered air assault students until we finished 0 day or officially considered in phase 1. So at the end of 0 day, we came in and they gave us like a last briefing. And so this is actually how it went anytime there's a big event coming, or at the end of any phase. So at the end of a phase, day 3 of a phase, you did your testing. After the testing was complete, you pretty much started the next phase. So if, like, for instance, let's say this was phase 1, the end of phase 1, day 3, you would take your testing, and then once everybody was done with testing, you would eat or not, depending on the timing of the day. And then you would go back to the classroom. They would give you a brief on whatever the next phase was, like actually starting like PowerPoints and stuff to give you information. And then when they finished whatever they wanted to tell you for that day, they would give you a short briefing on whatever the next physical event was. For the first few days, it was always PT. We had PT every morning until day 4. Yeah, after day 4, so day 5 was the first day we officially had no more PT. But up until that point, at the end of the day, they would give us a briefing on the next PT session in the morning, like what time to show up, what to wear, all that stuff. Yeah, then after PT ended, the only time they did that in particular was for the big things, so like the rock. But anyways, so that concluded day 1. We got our briefing at the end of 0 day, kind of giving us a little intro like into aircraft orientation almost. So kind of orientating your minds towards phase 1, and they gave us a briefing for day 1's PT, which we started the day off with push-ups, Y squats, mountain climbers, and I think that was about it. We pretty much just did those in rotation for I think close to an hour, or until somebody passed out again. It wasn't fun, but like your body kind of just got used to doing the same thing over and over and kind of doing it like with as much effort as it had. It wasn't really getting any more difficult after the 10th time we did sets of push-ups. After that, we went back for shower and breakfast, and the entire rest of the day was PowerPoints. They called it Death by PowerPoint because it was literally just a day full of PowerPoints, but I actually thought it was vaguely interesting. Part of it's because I'm a pilot, and so I enjoyed listening to them attempt to explain certain aircraft features. So there are a few things they got wrong. Actually, there were several things they got wrong. Them trying to explain fly-by-wire, trying to explain how a stabilator works. There were a bunch of things that they tried to explain from a pilot's perspective, and they failed. It was good enough. Like it wasn't like it was something that was going to be on the test, but people would ask questions and they would try to answer, or they would just try to explain something, and I don't think it went as well as they were hoping, but they got the point across. They got their job done, so I guess it was fine. Each instructor has a very different personality, which that's nothing new, but some of them were more interesting than others. Towards the end of the day, we got into more stuff that was just more boring in my opinion, and it didn't help that the instructors teaching that part were not as good at teaching, so it was more boring on their part. At the very end of the day, that last briefing for the next day, we were issued rubber ducks, so our little fake guns, and we were given our briefing for the 6-mile ruck. So day 2 was the 6-mile ruck. It was actually pretty nice. I used moleskin. I had to put it on my sides and on my feet to try to avoid blisters, and it actually worked. It's a 3-mile course, so you walk 3 miles one way, and then they give you a turnaround point item. In this case, it was a popsicle stick. You got there, they give you a popsicle stick, and you walked back 3 miles. Nothing much to say about it. It was a ruck. They did make you do it with your rubber duck. And then after that, we took our shower, and oh, this was the day they forgot to give us all the food. So when we came out for breakfast, they had about half as much food as they usually did. So the only thing I had for breakfast was biscuits, which I think the following day was the day I came out and there were no biscuits, only gravy. But for day 2, the only thing left were biscuits. So I had a breakfast of 2 biscuits. That's all they had left. The day was just continued death by PowerPoint. There were fewer PowerPoints to listen to, but they were more boring. They would go, PowerPoint, quiz you. PowerPoint, quiz you. Sometimes they would break up halfway through a PowerPoint to quiz you. But they really were trying to nail this into your head, and they would ask you all the important questions. So don't go into this worrying that you aren't going to be able to remember it all, because they will stomp their foot, they will clap their hands, they will do the chicken dance if that's what it takes to get your attention to tell you to memorize this item. So it's not that bad, but they actually gave you a few hours to study and kind of do whatever you need to do. So You can use it how you wanted, so you could do laundry, eat. I had to send more emails. You can study, do all that stuff. But they gave you plenty of time, so don't worry about that either. Day 3, we had rifle PT. The only 2 movements we did for rifle PT were rifle presses, and then the other one was like we brought it down, and then above our head and behind our head, and yeah, it was literally just this. So we did this with the rifle, then we would do this with the rifle, and then we'd do this with the rifle, and then we would do this with the rifle. We did that for 45 minutes to an hour. That's literally the entire rifle PT. We took our tests, which were a lot easier than we were expecting. Like, with all the information they covered, you expect these tests to be hard, but they're not. They're literally the questions that you were asked before. There were a few of them that were like a little tricky in the way they worded it, and there were a few that you definitely had to know numbers. Like they give you a chart. You want to memorize the numbers because they're going to want you to pretty much know that chart for the test. But it was all stuff they told you, and it wasn't that hard to memorize. We had several people get 100% on the test. Most people hit upper 80s, lower 90s. There were, again, I think like 6 people that failed that test. So that was just the first time. Most of them passed the second try. After that, we took a break, and then we started our briefings for sling loading. So we started, the first brief was a lot of just like how sling loading works, how they do it, the materials used, and stuff like that. And then day 4, so the first day of phase 2, was when we actually started getting into more details on like how to actually prepare and rig a sling load. That's all I have for today. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, make sure to like it below, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next video, which is going to go over phase 2 and 3 of air assault. So stay tuned for those. Have a great day, guys.